The British philosopher Alfred North Whitehead once wrote that the safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. This is not a complaint. It is a statement about the scale of what Plato accomplished, that the questions he identified, the frameworks he proposed, and the methods he pioneered have organized Western philosophy for 2,500 years, and that every thinker who came after him, whether accepting his conclusions or rejecting them, has been working within the space his thought defined. His real name was Aristocles. The name Plato, meaning broad or wide, was a nickname, given either for his broad shoulders and success in wrestling, or, as later tradition preferred, for the breadth of his forehead and the width of his thinking. He was born around 427 BC into one of the most distinguished families in Athens. His father's line traced back to the last king of Athens, his mother's to Solon, the legendary lawgiver who had laid the foundations of Athenian democracy. He was intended for a political career. He had every advantage that birth and intelligence could confer in the most sophisticated city in the Greek world. And then he met Socrates, and the political career did not happen. Socrates and the event that made everything. Plato was roughly 20 years old when he came into Socrates' orbit, and the relationship between them shaped the rest of his life so completely that it is almost impossible to separate Plato's thought from his response to Socrates, both to what Socrates taught and to what Athens did to Socrates in 399 BC. Socrates wrote nothing. What we know of his ideas comes almost entirely through Plato's dialogues, which present Socrates as the central figure in philosophical conversations on topics ranging from justice to love to the nature of the soul to the meaning of piety. Whether the Socrates of Plato's dialogues accurately represents the historical Socrates, or whether Plato increasingly used his teacher as a dramatic mouthpiece for ideas that were his own, is a question that has exercised scholars for centuries and cannot be resolved with certainty. What is certain is that Plato found in Socrates a model of what philosophical life could be. Relentless inquiry, the willingness to follow an argument wherever it led, the refusal to accept comfortable answers, and the conviction that an unexamined life, Socrates' own phrase, was not worth living. In 399 BC, Athens tried Socrates on charges of impiety and corrupting the youth. He was convicted by a jury of 500 citizens, a democratic majority, and sentenced to death. He died by drinking hemlock, surrounded by his friends, discussing the immortality of the soul. Plato was not present at the execution, reportedly because he was ill, but the event marked him permanently. The city he had been born to govern had killed the wisest man he knew. The democratic process he had been raised to respect had produced an act of supreme injustice. His political ambitions died with Socrates, and his philosophical ones were born. The Academy and the Philosopher's Life. After Socrates' death, Plato left Athens. He spent years traveling to Megara, to Egypt, to southern Italy and Sicily, where he encountered the Pythagorean philosophical communities that were to influence him profoundly. The Pythagoreans believed in the immortality and transmigration of souls, in the mathematical structure of reality, in the possibility that the cosmos was organized according to rational principles that human reason could discover. These ideas entered Plato's thinking and never left. Around 387 BC, Plato returned to Athens and founded his school in a grove sacred to the hero Academus, on the northwestern outskirts of the city. He called it the Academy. It was the first institution in European history that we can recognize as something like a university. A permanent community of scholars dedicated to systematic inquiry across multiple disciplines, where students came to study and remained to teach, where mathematics and astronomy and philosophy and political theory were all pursued as aspects of a single search for understanding. The Academy lasted, in various forms, for nearly 1,000 years, until the Byzantine Emperor Justinian closed it in 529 AD as a pagan institution incompatible with Christian rule. Plato taught at the Academy for the rest of his life, with the exception of 2 further visits to Sicily, both of which were attempts, ultimately unsuccessful, to implement his political philosophy in practice, advising the rulers of Syracuse on how to govern justly. The attempts ended badly. On one occasion he was nearly sold into slavery. He died in Athens around 347 BC, reportedly at a wedding feast, at the age of approximately 80. The theory of forms, reality behind reality. The central and most original contribution of Plato's philosophy is the theory of forms, or ideas, eidos in Greek, a word that means something like appearance or shape, but in Plato's usage refers to the essential nature of a thing, its defining character as distinct from its particular physical manifestations. The theory begins from an observation that seems simple. That when we say two things are both triangles, or both just, or both beautiful, we are recognizing something they have in common, some property that they share which makes the word triangle, or just, or beautiful, applicable to both of them. What is that common property? It cannot be any particular triangle, since particular triangles differ from each other and each is imperfect. It must be something that all particular triangles approximate but none fully is. The form of triangle, the perfect, eternal, unchanging triangular nature that particular triangles participate in to the degree that they are triangular. Plato extended this argument across all categories of experience. There is a form of justice, a form of beauty, a form of equality, a form of horse, a form of bed. The physical world we perceive with our senses is not the real world. It is a world of imperfect, perishable copies of the real world, which consists of these eternal, unchanging, immaterial forms. The philosopher's task is to turn away from the shadowy copies and ascend toward the originals. At the apex of the hierarchy of forms stands the form of the good, the source of being and truth for all other forms, analogous to the sun in the visible world, which gives things both their existence and their visibility. This is a radical claim. It means that mathematics is more real than physics, that the perfect circle exists in a way that no drawn or physical circle exists, and that the mathematician who studies circles is in closer contact with reality than the engineer who builds circular structures. It means that justice is a real thing, not merely a social convention, and that political arrangements can be evaluated objectively against the standard of the form of justice rather than merely compared against each other. It means that beauty is not in the eye of the beholder but in the form of beauty, and that our aesthetic responses are evidence of partial recognition of something genuinely there. The Allegory of the Cave. In the seventh book of the Republic, Plato offers the most famous image in the history of philosophy, the allegory of the cave. It is simultaneously a metaphysical statement about the nature of reality, an epistemological argument about the nature of knowledge, and a political parable about the relationship between the philosopher and society. Imagine, Plato says, a group of prisoners who have been chained in an underground cave since birth, their legs and necks fixed so that they can only look at the wall in front of them. Behind them, at some distance, a fire burns. Between the fire and the prisoners, people pass carrying objects, statues, models of animals, all kinds of things, whose shadows are cast on the wall by the firelight. The prisoners, who have never seen anything else, take these shadows to be reality. They develop expertise in predicting the order in which shadows appear, they give names to what they see, they argue about the shadows, and the cleverest among them is the one who best remembers which shadows tend to precede which others. Now imagine one prisoner is freed. He is dragged out of the cave, into the light. The transition is painful, the light is overwhelming after a lifetime of shadows, and at first he can see nothing clearly. Gradually his eyes adjust, first he can see shadows in the sunlight, then reflections in water, then the things themselves, then the night sky, then finally the sun, the source of light and life and the visibility of everything else. He understands, for the first time, what the shadows in the cave actually were, not reality but images of reality, cast by objects that were themselves only reflections of things illuminated by the sun. The interpretation Plato provides, the cave is the physical world as experienced through the senses. The shadows are the objects of ordinary perception, the chairs and trees and people we take to be real. The journey out of the cave is the philosopher's ascent through mathematics and dialectic toward knowledge of the forms. The sun is the form of the good. The freed prisoner who returns to the cave to tell the others what he has seen represents the philosopher who returns to political life, knowing that what he has to offer is knowledge of genuine reality rather than skill at managing shadows. The prisoner's likely response: to mock him, to refuse to believe him, possibly to kill him. Is Plato's implicit commentary on the death of Socrates. The allegory has proved inexhaustible as a framework for thinking about the relationship between appearance and reality, between ordinary experience and philosophical understanding, between the individual who achieves a wider perspective and the community that may resist it. It has been applied to politics, to science, to art, to religion, to media, and technology. The image of people watching shadows on a wall and mistaking them for the world has seemed newly applicable in nearly every generation that has encountered it. The soul and the chariot. Plato's account of the human soul is inseparable from his metaphysics. The soul is the part of a human being that is capable of knowing the forms, that has in some sense existed before birth in the presence of genuine reality, and that survives the death of the body to exist again. In the dialogue Meno, Plato presents his doctrine of anamnesis, recollection, through the demonstration that an uneducated slave boy can be led, by careful questioning alone, to work out a geometric theorem he has never been taught. The knowledge was already in him. Education is not the insertion of information but the drawing out of what is already known. In the Phaedrus, Plato offers the most vivid of his accounts of the soul's structure, a charioteer driving a team of 2 horses. The charioteer represents reason, the capacity for rational thought and philosophical understanding. One horse is noble and well-bred, responding to the charioteer's direction, representing the spirited or honorable part of the soul, courage, ambition, the desire for glory and achievement. The other horse is dark, stubborn, misshapen, and constantly pulls downward toward earthly satisfactions, appetite, physical desire, the hunger for pleasure and material things. The soul's journey through life is the effort of the charioteer to keep control of both horses, directing the noble one and restraining the base one, steering the whole toward the vision of genuine beauty and truth. Before birth, in this account, souls existed in a realm where they could directly perceive the forms, including the form of beauty, which is the most immediately recognizable of the forms when we encounter physical echoes of it. When we fall in love with a beautiful person, what we are actually responding to, though we do not know it, is the partial reflection in that person of the form of beauty that our soul once directly saw. Love, properly understood and properly directed, is the beginning of philosophy. The energy of erotic attraction transformed into the desire for genuine understanding, ascending from the beauty of one person to the beauty of all people to the beauty of souls to the beauty of knowledge to beauty itself. The Republic, the philosopher-king. The Republic is Plato's longest, most ambitious, and most controversial dialogue. Its ostensible subject is justice, what justice is, whether it is better to be just or unjust, and what a just society would look like. Its actual range is far broader. It encompasses epistemology, metaphysics, psychology, education, aesthetics, and political theory, all organized around the central question of what the good life is and how a society can be arranged to make it possible. Plato's argument is that justice in the state mirrors justice in the soul. A just soul is one in which reason governs appetite through the assistance of spirit, the 3 parts in their proper hierarchy. A just state is one in which the philosophically educated govern the courageous military through the cooperation of the productive class, again, 3 groups in proper hierarchy. The state is a soul writ large, the soul is a state in miniature. Understanding one illuminates the other. The philosopher-king, the person who has completed the long educational ascent from physical perception through mathematics to philosophical understanding of the forms, is, in Plato's account, the only person qualified to govern, because the only person qualified to govern is the one who knows what the good is, and only the philosopher knows that. The philosopher would prefer not to govern. Returning to the cave, after the brightness of the sun, is genuinely unpleasant, but is obligated to do so by justice, which requires each person to perform the function they are best suited for. The conditions Plato proposes for the guardian class: no private property, no family in the conventional sense, children raised by the state, strict control of the arts and education, have disturbed readers ever since. They are intended to eliminate the corruption that attaches to private interest. A ruler who owns property has an interest in protecting property. A ruler who has no property has only the common good to protect. Whether the prescription is coherent, whether it is desirable, whether it is compatible with human nature, whether it is the nightmare of totalitarianism or the vision of disinterested service, these arguments began in antiquity and have not ended. 2,500 years of consequences. Augustine of Hippo, writing in the 5th century AD as Christianity was becoming the dominant intellectual framework of the Western world, said that Plato had come closest of all the pagan philosophers to understanding the truth, that what Plato had called the form of the good, Christianity called God, and that the Platonic account of the soul's ascent toward immaterial, eternal truth was the closest pagan philosophy had come to the Christian account of the soul's journey toward the divine. This alignment was not accidental. The early Christian theologians were educated in the Platonic tradition, and they found in Platonism a philosophical vocabulary adequate to the theological claims they were making. The result was that Platonic ideas, the immortality of the soul, the existence of a transcendent realm of truth, the devaluation of the material world relative to the spiritual, entered Christian theology and through it the foundations of Western civilization. When the Florentine Platonic Academy, founded by Cosimo de' Medici and directed by Marsilio Ficino in the 15th century, produced the first complete Latin translation of Plato's dialogues, it made Platonism available to the full range of Renaissance intellectual culture. Ficino's translations and commentaries influenced Botticelli's mythological paintings, Michelangelo's sonnets, Leonardo's notebooks, and the entire Neoplatonic current of Renaissance humanism. The forms showed up in art theory as idealized beauty. Platonic love entered the culture as a concept of spiritual, non-physical attachment. In mathematics and physics, Platonism has never gone away. The question of whether mathematical objects, numbers, geometric forms, sets, exist independently of human minds, or whether they are inventions rather than discoveries, is still live and still organized around the options Plato defined. Many working mathematicians and physicists describe themselves as Platonists in the sense that they believe the mathematical structures they investigate are genuinely there, in some sense more real than the physical phenomena that instantiate them. When Eugene Wigner wrote his famous essay on the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences, the puzzling fact that abstract mathematical structures developed for purely theoretical reasons consistently turn out to describe physical reality, the puzzle he was articulating is precisely the puzzle of why the forms should correspond to the world of physical objects. Karl Popper, in The Open Society and Its Enemies, identified Plato as one of the historical origins of totalitarianism. The intellectual ancestor of political systems that claim to know the good and impose it on populations who have not consented. This reading has its critics, but the argument it makes about the political dangers of philosophical certainty has its own force. The philosopher-king, seen from one angle, is the ideal of disinterested wisdom. Seen from another, he is the prototype of every regime that has claimed to know better than the people it governs and acted accordingly. The dialogues themselves, the Symposium, the Phaedo, the Republic, the Theaetetus, the Timaeus, are among the greatest works of literary art in the Western tradition, independent of their philosophical content. They are dramatic, ironic, funny, poetic, and emotionally intelligent in ways that purely expository philosophical writing rarely is. The figure of Socrates in them, the ugly, barefoot, endlessly questioning gadfly of Athens, the wisest man precisely because he knew he did not know, is one of the great literary creations of any culture, in any period. Plato left no dogma. What he left was a method, the practice of examining assumptions, following arguments, refusing comfortable answers, and understanding that the goal of thought is not the accumulation of information but the transformation of the thinker. The cave, in his Allegory, is not a place we visit. It is where we live. The question is whether we are willing to be dragged toward the light.